Hey, strangers. Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Strange Sessions. I'm Krista, and with me is
Kurt.
We're so excited about this episode. What are we talking about today, Kurt?
Tonight we're going to be talking about David Paulides' series of books called Missing411 about people mysteriously disappearing and or being killed in national state parks. Forests.
I hear there's a movie. I haven't seen it yet.
No,
I can't even find it.
I've read reviews of it that weren't real hot. So somebody said it's basically just like a episode of something you would see on Investigation Discovery.
Oh. Well, that's cool. I'd still want to watch it, though.
Yeah.
I like to see the evidence that they have, rather than because I've listened to so many podcasts about the missing 411 cases.
You and me both.
We've gone deep down the rabbit hole.
Literally in the last week and a half, that is all I've been doing. You know, I usually listen to music when I drive around. I have been doing nothing but listening to podcast interviews with David. I keep wanting to call him Paulides.
Oh, I think it's Paulides.
It's Paulides.
Yeah. We'll
But
just call him Davey P.
DP.
DP. I feel like that's like the initials for something dirty. I'm not sure.
It is.
Oh, okay.
We'll discuss that later.
Oh, I just got it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's Friday. Yeah. So where are we going to start?
Housekeeping? Do we have any housekeeping?
Do we have any housekeeping?
We actually got a couple submissions, like email stuff about blue whale things. My
that's
friend
right.
Luke Matthias sent me one. There was just that news story where that girl that killed herself, they think that was a factor because she had painted blue whales. She had paintings of blue whales that she made.
Okay.
And they also found a sketch of that, I can't remember her name off the top of my head now, but the girl that took the selfie
in front of the train.
In front of the train and then killed herself, she had a sketch of her.
Okay.
So they think that was directly involved with the blue whale game.
And didn't BDZ send us something?
Yep. Don't remember off the top of my head what it was.
I want to say
there's a lot of just warnings.
Yeah, it's still out there. It's still in the news. It's just not. I haven't seen anything locally, in our news talking about it. But I wonder if what's happening is people are hearing about it.
That's
now
what,
it turns into like a
Luke,
copycat
my friend
thing.
Luke Matthias that sent me that. Giving you a shout out, Luke. He's probably not going to listen to this podcast because I told him not to because he is going camping.
Don't listen to this.
Soon. So this might not be maybe wait till after you're done camping to listen to this one. But I'm giving him a shout out. I met up with him and some other friends this past Monday, and Luke showed up early, so we talked about a lot of this stuff, and he's actually really into a lot of this stuff that I never really realized he really enjoys.
Oh, cool.
This.
And he's listening to the podcast?
Yes.
Sweet. Hi, Luke.
He sent me a message on Facebook saying he wanted us to look into groups like the Illuminati.
Oh, yeah. We got to have Joe on for that,
will love
though.
That one.
And it's
funny because he said he wanted us to do a show about NORAD.
Okay, I know you mentioned that.
I was like, why? So but he meant HARP.
Oh, why?
He meant HARP because HARP has a lot of kind of weird things attached to it. So he'd like us to do a show about that. So at some point in the future,
let's do it.
But
I don't know a whole lot about those, but I'm willing to learn.
As far as other housekeeping,
I can't think of anything.
Just those blue whales. Keep sending us these articles. Luke and I just said that too, that even if it wasn't a thing, now that more people are finding out about it, it's going to become a thing.
Right, exactly.
So just keep those stories coming. Other housekeeping. We've had weird stuff happen here.
Yeah. We'll keep you posted on that, but we're recording in an old school. And it seems like every other time that we're here, we hear strange noises coming from the hallway, and we're the only people in the whole building.
Yeah, last time we mentioned that at the end of the podcast that we were having strange things happen, and when we shut down, we went out, and the hallway outside the studio door is on a motion detector that it'll flip the lights on if there's motion out there, and it was on, and it should not have been on.
No, it goes off within like a minute or two tops.
Like in a minute, so and the fact that it was on is kind of weird.
Yeah, because we sat in the parking lot and talked for a few minutes, and then we drove away.
Yeah, and we've heard sounds and...
Well, and today, Kurt was, we're recording right now, actually. Yeah, we have recorders going.
We have digital recorders out in the hallway.
So we're recording while we record. And Kurt had the headphones on, of course, and I heard a really loud noise come from the hallway, and we had been in here for a good 5 minutes, and when I went and peeked out the door, the hallway light was on, and that's, as Kurt said, on a motion detector. So it's really strange that a few seconds after I heard this loud noise,
And
the
it's
lights
when
were
I had
on.
the headphones on, so I couldn't hear
So
anything.
Kurt couldn't hear it, yeah. So I'll be interested to see if the recorder picks anything up.
Yeah, but either way, there's weird stuff happening here.
Definitely. I think so. I've gotten a vibe.
Yeah. But like you said, it's not every time.
No. We'll come and it'll be completely silent.
I still feel like it's when you and I are here together.
It could be. Because when Jeff and Joe and I are here, for anyone listening for the first time, those are my partners in Old School Media. This podcast you're listening to here is an Old School Media production, along with Paranormal Palaver, Friday Nights with Jeff and Joe, and a few more that are in production. But we've never heard anything when the three of us are here.
No.
Ever. But there have also been
you
a
guys
lot of
saying
times
that.
when other people have been here, so there's a lot of noise going on in the background. So maybe it's just never been quiet enough for us to hear noises, if that makes sense.
Just very strange.
Yeah, it is.
If you hear anything during this podcast, think it's an EVP or a ghost talking, my stomach is extra gurgly tonight, and I have no idea why. It was probably the late 2 double cheeseburgers and cheese curds I had for lunch.
That's my vote.
Yeah. And the Coors Light I drank while I was waiting for you to get
Less
here.
paranormal, more
internal.
digestion. Yes, exactly.
Digestion. So if you hear any of that, that's just me.
Yep.
And is there anything else?
I don't think so. I think we are ready to dive into this.
Has anything interesting happened in your life? I think they like hearing banter between us.
Oh, we're going to talk a little. I got a promotion at work.
Awesome. Nice
That's
job.
pretty exciting.
Nice job.
Yeah, that was exciting. Doing a podcast for work, so that's pretty cool.
What do you talk about on that podcast?
So it's a podcast made by members. That's what we call our employees, about members. So we just interviewed like 8 people now. Someone is an ultra marathoner. Someone rides horses. Another one has like a whole hobby farm that they're doing. So it's basically
really cool that you do that.
Yeah, it's really fun. So we're basically giving members a way to get to know each other on a different level.
And where do you work for people that don't know?
Johnsonville.
Yes, they make excellent bratwurst.
Sure do.
Oh.
So yeah, so that it's something that we're really just making it for members, but it will be available through any podcast app. It's called Off the Clock, and hopefully that will be coming out in August sometime.
Very awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. What have you been up to, Kurt?
I don't have anything.
Eating cheeseburgers and
I'm trying
cheese
to.
curds.
I'm on a diet, so I was.
Oh, I'm
technically-
always on a
It
diet,
was
Kurt.
technically my splurge day today, so
Your splurge day.
yeah.
Are you supposed to have a splurge meal or a splurge
I'm working
day?
down to a splurge meal.
Okay.
It started splurge weeks. Now
I feel like
splurge days.
I feel like a splurge day could completely cover all the calories that you cut
depends
out.
on what you have for breakfast, dinner,
Lunch, dinner,
snack.
snacks. So this room is nothing but snacks. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, it doesn't help when there's Oreo cookies right in the closet
I
when I get
know.
here.
God, I love Oreos.
So I had Oreo cookies and Coors Light, so that might explain the
And beef jerky.
and beef jerky. So that could
It's a
explain
great
the
combination.
rumbly tummy too.
Could be.
But no, otherwise I haven't been doing anything. I've been listening to these Missing 411 interviews nonstop.
Well, okay, I'm obsessed with missing persons cases to begin with. I listen to so many podcasts just about missing persons. To have a topic that has, sort of more mysterious or even paranormal type theories to it is really interesting to me.
When we came, when you asked me if I wanted to do a podcast and stuff, this was one of the first things I thought of, because I've always been interested in this, but I'm also kind of lazy, and I feel
Let someone else do all the work.
I feel like, well, I could research that, or I could play a video game. I want to play a video game.
Right.
So doing the podcast kind of forces me to go and research this. So it's actually kind of really cool that I've spent so much time lately listening to this stuff. Do you just want to jump into the Missing 411
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Well, the thing with David Paulides is that he has a clamp on all this stuff. Like, these books are available on his website, which is www.canammissing.com.
Can you get them through Amazon too?
You can, but they're like 3 times
outrageously expensive.
because he won't sell them on Amazon, so people buy them and then they resell them on Amazon.
Oh, sure.
And he's trying to stop people from doing that. He won't do ebook versions of it because he says those can be put online. I don't know if it's that he wants the money so badly from it, or if he just wants to control the information
Could be. Maybe it's both.
coming out of it. There's
I mean, I can understand that he's put a lot of work into this, and to have, you think about musicians and all the money they're losing.
And then all of a sudden it's
everybody's just
online
making
as a
copies of
PDF
it
or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, I understand that, but like there's not a lot about it. There's a lot about it on the internet, but it's mostly just like about what it's about.
Right.
There's
regurgitating.
Yeah,
just
there's
like
Reddit groups that talk about some of the individual cases.
Yeah, I was on
but
there
for
today.
the most part, if you want to know about this stuff, you need to buy the books.
Or watch the movie, apparently.
In the podcasts, he always says you're not going to have a clear idea of what's going on listening to the podcast. You need to buy the books. And I think at some point I am going to buy the first book. There's 6 of them. I think it's the last one he wrote. You and I are probably going to talk about at a future date.
Okay.
Because that's about a topic that you have said that you wanted to cover on this podcast.
Well, I'm like, what? I feel like really intrigued. What did I say?
Book is about the mostly Midwestern, but around the country, the college students that disappear and end up
Mississippi
drowning.
River.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in Wisconsin.
So he covers that in a more recent
book?
book?
He writes a new book called A Sobering Conclusion.
Oh, yes.
Which
okay.
is about, and it's happened a lot in Wisconsin where these college students end up drowning in a river.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while there was a theory that there were a group of serial killers because there were smiley faces found at a lot of the locations, but that's pretty much been debunked.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably a book we'll talk about when we talk about that topic.
Yeah, definitely. That's a whole topic all by itself.
It is. And I think I don't know if it's a separate book or if it's part of one of the other books, but he also gets into, he originally started with national parks.
Yeah.
And then it kind of expanded to state parks, and then it kind of expanded to woods.
Just woods in general. And
he also, I don't know if it's an individual book or something else, but he's also been discussing people that go missing, but they leave like weird telephone messages or calls, like, or just weird voice things before they disappear.
Okay.
So that's probably something we could even do a topic on, a show on at some point in the future. But his first books discuss mainly national parks and state parks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably just going to call him David P. because I hate having to think each time about
Davey P.
Davey P. In the 70s, he worked for the police department. He has 16 and a half years of police work, including intelligence, SWAT team work, and detective work.
Okay.
So he's kind of done...
That's pretty good.
He's kind of done it all. I've heard bits and pieces saying that he was let go for doing not so kosher things.
Oh, outside the book kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not. But after the police work, he kind of got into Bigfoot research.
Oh,
yeah,
nice. It's right up my alley.
Your fiction. But, he got into doing the Bigfoot stuff.
Okay.
And he never explicitly says it, but I'm assuming that what he's talking about here is research for a Bigfoot book. But how this Missing411 stuff all started was, I couldn't really tie down a date for this either. I'm thinking 2011, 2012.
Okay, which is really recent.
Yeah, he was at Yosemite National Park, and he was talking to people there, trying to get information for what he said was a book on a peripheral side topic.
Okay.
So I'm assuming it was Bigfoot.
Sure.
So he was there talking to park rangers, talking to people that work at the concession stands and all that stuff. And one of those nights he went back to his hotel room and he got settled in, and a little while later there was a knock at the door, and he opened it up, and there were 2 of the park rangers that he had talked to that day. They were off duty, they're plain clothes.
Yeah.
They asked if they could come in and talk to him, so he let them in. And he talked to the 2 of them, and they both said they wanted to talk to him because they knew what kind of research he's done. And they had both worked at various parks around the country, and they got to talking, and they said that at all the parks they worked at, there were a lot of unusual missing people cases.
Okay.
Where there were weird things about it.
Yeah.
And the park would put in a good effort to look for them, and after like 7 days or whatever, it would just be pretty much completely dropped. And the only people that would remain looking for them were their family members or
friends,
volunteers or friends. So they wanted him to look into that.
Okay.
So he decided to
So
go
it
down.
didn't even start out as something that had like weird, mysterious circumstances?
No, it was just that those 2
they
rangers
thought they were
came
being
because they
mishandled.
were concerned that there were these mysterious deaths, mysterious disappearances going on. Like the next day, he called the park I don't know what you would call it, like not the park headquarters.
Sure.
The
I know
park
what you mean.
office
Yeah.
For Yosemite, asking if he could get a copy of the missing persons report that people had disappeared in the park. And the person he talked to said, we don't have one.
Yeah.
And he was like,
it sounds
what?
like he ran
Yeah.
into that a lot
Yeah,
with
he did.
all different things.
So he was just stumped, and they said, no, we don't have that.
That's crazy. Of
It's
course
crazy
they do.
because so many parks have...
They keep logs of everything.
Yeah, they said, you know...
It's
a
a
government...
government...
Podcast, he said, if you fart on a trail in a park, there's probably a record of it somewhere.
Well, it's a government entity.
Yes.
They log everything.
So they said, no, we don't keep records of that. And he asked...
I call bullshit.
He asked, could you guys compile a list for me? And they said, sure, we'll get back to you. So then a week or so went by, and they got back to him, and they said, we can compile a list, but it'll cost you $34,000.
That's right. Yes, it was insane.
And he couldn't believe that.
Well, yeah, because it's insane.
And then they said if you want it for all of the national parks, it would be $1.4 million.
And what was the reason?
Because of all the hours that would go into doing it.
That's crazy.
So then he asked him, he said, you seriously don't? How do you keep a record of this? And the person he was talking to said, we rely on the memories of our employees.
Oh, that's
which
great.
is the stupidest thing, because you have people leaving, going to different jobs, going to different parks, and you're going to ask somebody about a disappearance that happened 10 years ago, you know, what they remember about it. So that whole thing was just kind of fishy.
Lies.
Yeah.
All lies.
Totally all lies. So he didn't pay the money.
Of course not.
He
because it's insane.
he went and started just researching the stuff on his own.
Okay.
So then he started piecing things together.
So question.
Yes.
If someone goes missing in a state forest, do the police not get involved? Or is it the rangers?
I believe it's pretty much the park rangers.
So they wouldn't bring in an outside police agency to...
I don't know.
I suppose if they did, that agency would have something on record. But if they didn't...
One of these cases I'm going to talk about have a weird thing with that.
Okay.
So that'll be in there. But I don't really know if the police... I'm assuming the police are involved because you need more people. I mean, the park service has...
Right.
You know, they do have their own, like, investigators and all that stuff, but I'm assuming the police are involved.
And so that would make me think the police would have record. If the park ranger or the park, service office doesn't have records, the police must have records.
You would think, but they probably don't have, like, a formatted list.
Yeah, probably not.
You know, like the park should have.
Right.
Yeah, so that whole thing is just weird that they didn't have that.
Yeah. That's totally illogical. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and everywhere he went, they put up a wall that he couldn't do anything. There was a 14-year-old girl named Stacy Aris that disappeared from Yosemite in 1981 on July 18th. Totally vanished. She was with a family member. They had rented a cabin. There was like a nice cabin there. And there was a lake a little ways down, and she told her grandfather, I believe, that she was going to go down and take pictures of the lake.
Okay.
So then time passed. She never came back, and she was just gone. They found her camera lens cap on the edge of the forest right by the lake, and that is all they found. They never found the camera. They never found her. And when he was doing his research...
How long was it? How long was she gone before they realized she was missing?
Just like a matter of hours.
Okay.
A matter of hours. And they had a lot of people there searching for her within hours of her disappearing, and all they found was her lens cap.
Okay.
So David... He put in a Freedom of Information Act request to get the facts about this.
Right.
So he did that, and then he got a call from, I can't remember if it was a park lawyer or a park investigator.
Okay.
Called him and asked him, what do you want this for? And he said, part of the Freedom of Information Act is that you can't ask me what I want it for.
Matter.
And then that shouldn't matter to whether or not he gets it.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy said, well, what do you want it for? So he told him what he wanted it for, and the guy kind of laughed, and he said, you're never going to see that file.
That's bizarre. You'd think they'd want to share it with as many people as they
Is
could.
that the missing people, that's what he can't understand, is that the people that are missing, you would want that information out there. You would want people looking for them. And everywhere he went, he came up roadblocks that they do not want this stuff known. Yeah, he specifically laughed and said, you are never getting this file.
It makes me... Okay.
And
so here's the thing.
He said, is this a crime investigation. And the guy said, no.
It's not an open investigation.
Yeah. He said, has anybody looked at this file in the last 10 years? And the guy said, no. And then the guy said, you are not getting this file.
So what I find, of course, I have to play devil's advocate a little bit, but has anyone validated any of this? Like, if somebody tried to get this information, would we get the same answer? You know,
I don't know.
We're kind of just taking his word for it.
I haven't read his books, but people that read his books said they are thoroughly researched.
Yeah.
That he has photocopies of reports. He has photocopies of autopsies.
Okay.
So he said, people say that they're meticulously
researched.
Okay. But as far as this stuff, I don't know.
I mean, we kind of just have to take his word for it because we have no way to validate any of that.
So everywhere he went, just couldn't get anything. So he just started doing his own research, and he started noticing that there were a lot of trends in these strange disappearances.
The circumstances,
and
how things were found.
Weird. Some of them are, you have no idea.
So are we going to talk about that?
Yeah,
okay.
I have a couple separate cases here. We're going to talk about this, and then I'm going to talk about the common factors.
Yeah, that's what I want to get into. Because it's really interesting to me.
It is.
They're really specific things that don't make any sense.
No, and it happens in a lot of these cases.
Yeah.
But like this first one we're going to talk about is one of the bigger, more well-known cases, and it has weird things just like almost all of his cases do. He said that if a case looks like it can be attributed to an animal attack, a suicide, somebody wanting to fake their own death and start their life over, he immediately throws it out.
Oh, great. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, these are truly the only cases that are left are the ones that have no logical explanation.
And literally, if our listeners ever want us to do an episode where we just discuss stories,
a specific case, you mean?
Specific case stories, these weird, mysterious disappearances, let me know, because there's more than enough material. There is a 4-hour video on YouTube talking about some of the weirdest disappearances / deaths.
Okay.
So if you guys are really interested in this and would like us to do a whole episode where we discuss cases, we could totally do that.
Yeah.
One of the most well-known cases is that of Dennis Martin. He was a 6-year-old boy.
And that's what's interesting is a lot of them are little kids.
Yeah. Yep.
That's really sad, actually.
The factors.
Okay.
That's a weird thing, too. But he was 6 years old. He had mental difficulties.
Okay.
He was in like a special needs class. I don't know what you would call that.
Developmentally delayed.
Yeah, not slow. So he had developmental issues.
Okay.
He was out June 14th, 1969 on Father's Day weekend with his family. They were in the Great Smoky Mountains, like high away from way out in the middle of nowhere.
Civilization,
yes,
yeah.
Way out in the middle of nowhere in the Smoky Mountains. The family did this every year. This was like a tradition for them. They were off the Appalachian Trail in a location known as Spence Field. It was just a field with a lot of bushes. I've seen pictures of it on the internet.
Okay.
And it's like in the middle of nowhere. So they were out there just hanging out, and then another family just happened to be there, which was weird on its own. They came walking up. They asked if their kids could play with the Martins' kids, and they said sure. So then they shook hands, introduced themselves, and it turns out both families' last name was Martin, which is weird.
That's odd.
That's very odd.
You run into a family in the middle of nowhere on the Appalachian Trail, and they have the same last name as you. Okay.
So the kids were all playing. They decided to play hide and seek.
Oh, boy.
Don't do that. That's not a good thing to do.
Rule number 1. Hide and never find.
Dennis's father, Bill Martin, he was sitting on a rock, and he watched the boys run off, and he saw Dennis run behind a bush. It was a little ways away. I want to say like maybe half a football field length.
Okay,
but
that's not that far.
Enough. No,
that's not that far.
Dennis had a bright red jacket on, so he was really easily seen.
Yeah.
So he saw him run behind this bush, and he was watching the kids play hide and seek, and the other kids were found and stuff and came out, and Dennis never came out. So he started to think something was up, and he walked over to the bush, and the boy was gone. Just gone. The bush wasn't that far from the actual Appalachian Trail.
Okay.
So his father was in pretty good shape, so he ended up running 2 miles either way down the trail looking for him, and the boy was just gone.
Wow.
They didn't see any movement in the bushes. It was just like he went behind the bush and just
was
vanished.
just gone.
He was just gone.
Okay.
So, around the same time, there was another family there whose last name was Key. They were the Key family. They had come there, and they had asked at the office where they would be able to see wildlife like bears and stuff like that. So they told them, they sent them down this trail that wasn't that far from Spence Field.
Okay, I'd be like, where's this area? And then I'd walk in the opposite direction.
Yeah, but
can you point the direction to where the bears are? Let's go there.
I kind of don't get that either.
Okay, anyway.
You know, they wanted to see some bears and wildlife, so the office sent them to this area that was on like near a mountainous area. It was like a mountainous area kind of near Spence Field, but not super close to it. So the Key family walked there, and all of a sudden they heard this, like what they described as a sickening scream.
Okay.
They looked up on this ridge at this mountain, and the son pointed up and he said, "Look, there's a bear." So the parents are looking up there, and the dad says, "I think that's a man," because it was just like a hairy covered man. And
what?
He was like jumping, like moving from tree to tree and like crouching down in the bushes so that they wouldn't see him.
I've never heard this before.
Yes.
So it's Bigfoot.
So that's one of the theories.
Okay.
But they pointed to him and they said, "I don't think that's a bear. That looks like a man." And then there's something else that'll come into play in a little bit. So they had no idea what they saw. They ended up leaving the park. They got home and they saw the news reports about the boy missing.
Yeah.
And they went back and they notified.
That they heard the scream,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Well, the first thing they did was they called the FBI.
Okay.
And they told the FBI, "Come and meet us. We will show you the ridge where we saw this." And the FBI said, "No, do not go back to the park. We'll meet you at a restaurant. You can explain to us what happened there." The FBI would not let them go back to the park. They were adamant about that.
I wonder why.
I don't know. And which is really weird.
Like a safety issue or?
Don't know. That's one of the questions.
Okay. Interesting.
So, they talked to the FBI. Dennis's dad had a deal with the park people that the park people would tell him anything that would help lead to his son being found.
Mm-hmm.
And he found out from a reporter about what the Key family saw. The park never told him.
Jeez.
So he was furious.
Because that seems really,
Yes.
really pertinent to the investigation.
So he was really upset. David Paulides, when he was doing the research for this book, he actually went to Dennis's father to talk to him. And his father said he didn't give interviews anymore. And he kind of persuaded him to come out and talk to him. So he came out and talked to him on the front porch for like 15, 20 minutes about this. And David asked him, was there anything important that was not released in any of the news stories about this? And Dennis's father said yes. It was never released that the Key family, when they saw that creature, they said that the creature appeared to have something slung over its shoulder, that he was carrying it with him.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. So how many people are in this family? The Key family? What was it? A mom and a dad and kids?
And a boy. And a little boy. I think. Yeah.
Okay.
They said he appeared to be carrying something slung over his shoulder when he was like moving from tree to tree trying to avoid the family.
It gave me the heebie-jeebies.
So then Dennis's dad was just pissed that, that this was never released, because that was kind of a big...
Because they could have searched that area.
Yeah.
I mean,
the FBI didn't want to go back to that area to search it.
Because they're afraid of Bigfoot.
So that's weird. And
Okay.
then also what's weird is that the day after the disappearance, when people were out there looking, a division of Green Berets showed up. Nobody had called them. They were heavily armed.
I think I've heard about this
they were
happening.
They were heavily armed, and they would not communicate with the park people. They said, "You guys do your thing, we'll do our thing." They set up their own separate communications. There was no communication between the different people.
I think I've heard that this has happened more than once.
I've only Paulides said it only happened a couple times.
Okay.
Where these people come in.
Okay.
But they just thought it was weird that they showed up heavily armed.
After probably word got out about the sighting from the Key family.
And then after a couple days, they packed up and left, and that was it. Nobody contacted them. Nobody knows why they were there. But on one of the message boards that David was on, somebody, and you got to take this with a grain of salt, but somebody that claimed to be in the Green Berets at one time wrote back about this. And another thing that was weird about the case that I forgot to mention was that they brought out the dogs.
Yeah.
The search dogs.
Of course, as
and
they
the cadaver
should.
dogs.
Okay.
And, the dogs smelled some of his clothes, and they said the dogs just laid down. They would not
There's
go
nothing.
look. Nope, they would not go look. They would walk around in circles. They would not go look.
Okay.
If they made them go out in the field and look, they would just kind of roam around and not do anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Usually, dogs like that, they live to do that sort of thing.
Yep, that's what's in here. That's what this Green Beret that wrote back on the forum said. His exact quote was, "I've done some research on this case, both while on active duty and after my retirement. The inside facts of this case depict a frightening investigation. Bottom line is that searching started within a few minutes of the boy's disappearance and lasted 3 months with every resource imaginable being deployed. Our special forces are never called to assist in civilian operations. That falls to the local National Guard and has to be approved by the state governor. The fact that they were armed as well is another big no-no. During my command and every other mission I was aware of, we were not allowed by federal protocol to do either. Something is very wrong with this scenario."
So he's saying
That something was
that
weird.
there was actually a 3-month investigation involving all kinds of different forces that nobody was even aware of.
Yep. He said the Green Berets that were tasked in this search were there for a very specific reason. They were armed for a specific reason. I can't and won't say why because my oath documents won't allow it. What that means,
Well, okay.
I don't know.
I can read into that based on the key.
Says that same year in the southern jungles of Cambodia, we lost a man on team maneuvers one night. This was in some of the worst possible weather and impossible terrain known in this world. His tracks were instantly washed away, and nighttime operations were difficult as a rule. After a week's time, our dogs finally tracked him down. The dogs live for these missions, and they love it. In the Martin case, the dogs just laying down, whining, and refusing to search is just wrong. Several sets of dogs of several different breeds. That fact alone promotes the high strangeness factor of this situation.
Yeah.
So even this guy says there was something not right about that.
Yeah. So does that mean there was just no trace of that boy?
I don't know.
I know that you have to do it within a day or two because by then any scent trace is gone.
Yeah.
And they can't pick it up.
And they said cadaver dogs that should be able to smell a corpse for miles or whatever don't pick anything up. So he was just gone, and that's pretty much where that ends. That he was never found.
Yeah. So so that's interesting because there are cases where they are found.
Yeah.
And the circumstances surrounding that are always really strange.
Yeah. Here's one where...
First of all, I just want to say I can't imagine the desperation that those parents must go through.
Especially when you don't feel like you're getting help that you're supposed to be getting.
I would never leave the woods.
No.
I would just be looking all the time. Okay, people, if you're going to take your small children into the vast forest, maybe you should be putting GPS trackers on all of them.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, this problem wouldn't happen.
People have disappeared that are experienced skiers, experienced hunters that have cell phones with them. They have GPSs with them, and they end up dead.
Wow.
And they shouldn't.
Right.
That's the mysterious thing. But here's a situation where a boy disappeared and actually turned up alive.
Oh, okay.
It's
still,
still,
you don't really hear about these very
still
often.
Very weird.
Yeah.
It happened in South Carolina in 2011.
So was this first one like West Virginia, that area? I know the Smoky. No, that's the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Yeah, I'm not
thinking
sure where
the Appalachian Trail spans hundreds of.
The Appalachian Trail is in these stories a lot. There's a lot of weirdness on the Appalachian Trail.
And it does span many states. So
Yep.
I mean, I guess I can see that.
Yeah.
Is it the Blue Ridge Mountains in West Virginia? Yes,
I think so.
It is the Blue Ridge Mountains. But I know the Appalachian Trail. That's one of the trailheads there.
That
so
shows
I was
up in
curious.
these stories time after time is that trail. But like you said, it's a long trail.
It is, yeah. Okay, so now we're in South Carolina.
South Carolina, 2011. The boy was 21 months old.
Oh.
So very young.
Yeah.
He was playing in the house with his dog. His mom was in the house. She went to another room for what she said was maybe 2 minutes. Came back out. Boy was gone.
So is this like in the woods? Like I see we're in a
live
house
right by
now.
a woods.
Okay.
Yes, they live right by a woods. They came out and the boy was gone. There was a large open field surrounding the residence, and then there was a thick woods behind it.
Okay.
So she started to panic. And after a little while,
Was there a dog? You said there was a
Yes,
dog,
it
too?
didn't really say how long after, but a little while after, the dog came out of the woods, came back to the house. The boy wasn't with the dog, but the dog came back. They said that the dog just kind of laid down and was acting really weird.
Yeah.
Laid down on the deck and was just acting really weird. Boy wasn't with him. So the mother called the sheriff, and tons of people started to come to search. They had a big search party. And then immediately after the search party showed up, it started to rain really bad. And that's something that's going to show up in the trends that he picked up. But it started to rain really bad. Searchers walked around the property. They walked around the forest. Couldn't find anything. The next morning, a sheriff's deputy and a natural resource officer were out in the river 2 miles from the house in a kayak, looking on the river. Didn't find anything. A search helicopter was flying over the river with, professional spotters looking. Mm-hmm. They were flying over. They didn't see anything. The 2 law enforcement officers were paddling upstream from the area of the residence. They turned a corner in the river, and on the middle of a river on this sandbar, they found the boy laying there on his back in the sand. They called the helicopter. The helicopter said a minute before that they flew over.
And
they specifically looked at the sandbar, and there was nobody there.
What?
So
was he conscious?
He was not conscious, but he was alive.
Okay, how did he get there then? I could see if he was awake.
Yeah, they called the helicopter. The helicopter steadfastly said he was not on the sandbar minutes before because they flew over it and they specifically looked.
And now he's lying there unconscious.
Yes. The question is, how did
he get there?
How did he get there?
I mean, the first logical is that someone put him there, heard the helicopter, carried him out there.
It was raining like crazy. It was 40 degrees.
Oh, just gave me the chills.
So, no idea.
Okay.
They didn't say if the 21 months old, you're not going to really say anything. But
2, the boy, they're probably just getting around to talking.
He was unconscious, but he lived.
Yeah.
And was okay. And they have no idea what happened.
I don't
really understand
strange.
How he could have. I don't know if he could have swam or if it was shallow enough, but if they were out there in a kayak, I don't think he could have walked across the river and collapsed on the sandbar. Not
just under 2 years old. I mean, how well are you even walking at that time? I don't have kids, so I couldn't answer that question.
So that's a typical kind of case that shows up in these.
Yeah. And how far away was this from their house?
It was 2 miles. 2 miles away.
And when? How long after?
It was the morning after.
So he was out there for like 24 hours, maybe.
Close to 24 hours. Which is possible, but that's also going to come up in the...
Right.
That's going to come up in the trends.
I could see how that would be possible for maybe a 5-year-old who is, a good walker, who they run everywhere, but a less than 2-year-old to get 2 miles through wooded terrain.
I put that story in because that is very typical of what these stories are like.
Right. Kids end up... Well, it seems like they find the kids, either their bodies or them alive, in places that would be impossible, a distance that would be impossible for them to travel in the time
that's one of the
allotted.
That is one of the trends that always shows up in these things.
Okay.
The third one I have is just weird. This is always cited as the weirdest case.
Okay.
The person that this happened to didn't want their name out.
Okay.
Or his father didn't want the name out, so he refers to him as John Doe.
John Doe, okay.
So this happened in 2010. Three-year-old boy, John Doe, was camping with his family near Mount Shasta, California, which is supposed to have weird things. There's a lot of weird things that are supposed to happen there. UFO sightings.
Okay.
All that kind of stuff. He was camping with his family on the banks of a large creek. About 6 o'clock at night, he disappeared. Just all of a sudden gone. Could not find him anywhere. The parents searched around for a few hours, could not find him. They finally contacted the local sheriff and the Forest Service.
Okay. Is this on the water?
This is near the water.
Near
a creek. So searchers showed up. They went around looking for him. 5 hours after he was missing, they found him just laying under a thicket next to the trail that everybody had been using, just laying there.
Okay. Just taking a nap.
Yep, just laying there. So about 3 weeks after the incident, his grandmother was kind of talking to him a little bit about it. Then all of a sudden, he said he didn't like his other grandma, Cappy. And Cappy was the boy's name for his grandma. That the one that he was talking to was Kathy, but he called her Grandma Cappy.
Okay.
So he told her, he said, I don't like the other Grandma Cappy. She asked him what he meant, and his exact words were, "Don't you remember when I was lost in the woods? The other Grandma Cappy grabbed me and took me to a creepy place."
Oh, that just gave me the chills.
He said, "We were in a cave with spiders, and there were piles of purses and guns."
Oh, my God. This is a 6-year-old?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
he is 3 years old.
3 years old. Okay.
He said, "I was scared. I didn't touch anything. But when Grandma Cappy climbed a ladder, I saw sparks coming out of her head, so I knew she was a robot."
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And he
That
said
is
there
the
were
most
other robots. There
bizarre
were other
thing.
robots in the cave too, but none of them moved. He said, "Grandma Cappy made me lay down and look at my tummy, and then she tried to make me poop on a piece of sticky paper, but I couldn't go, and she got mad. She then told me I am from outer space, and they put me in my mom's tummy. She took me back to the river and told me to lay under a bush until someone found me." And that was...
That is the weirdest thing I have ever heard.
I know.
Okay. Kids have crazy imaginations,
They do.
but that is a really
And
weird story to
what's
come
really
up
weird to me
with.
about the story is that if you want to do like a medical check on somebody, checking their poop is
Number 1.
number 2. But checking their poop is
Ba-dum-bum.
checking their poop's a good way to do it. So that's just weird.
Sparks coming out of the top of her head. There's so many weird details in there. It's really detailed.
Yes, it is.
I mean, kids make up wild stories all the time.
But why?
I'd be curious to know if this kid has made up, is that just a normal thing?
I don't know. The thing with the poop on the sticky paper is weird to me because if you wanted
so
to check
specific.
somebody out to see how they were doing, you would do that.
Well, and for him to come up with the idea that this old lady told him that he came from outer space.
Yeah. And then there was also, I didn't include this on here, but there was also reports that that the boy's parents had been camping a year previous to this, and they woke up with what they thought were strange bug bites on the back of their neck.
Oh,
and they
Lord.
both had the strange bug bites on the back of their neck.
Interesting.
So, that could have been a UFO kind of thing.
Could have been.
I don't know. Yeah, so that's just weird. That's one of the weirder stories.
Yeah, I mean, wow, I've never read that one.
Yeah, but there's a lot of just weird things. Like there's a lot of reports where these kids say that they were hiding from the people in the woods. And they don't mean the searchers, because this is at a time when nobody is out searching for them, that they were trying to keep away from the searchers in the woods.
Yeah.
There was one little boy that said he spent the night trying to get away from the helicopter lights and the motorcycle lights when there were no helicopters out at night looking for him. There was a boy that had disappeared for 3 days, and he said it was weird that the sun never went down, that the sun was constantly out for those 3 days.
That's
There
weird.
was an older lady, I want to say in her 50s, that disappeared, and she said when they found her, she said that on one of the nights she disappeared, she was devastated because she could see people in the bushes, but none of them would respond to her.
Oh, I remember
She would see
hearing
the
that.
people looking at her.
Yes.
and
Like
none of
she
them-
was in another dimension
and,
or
like, none of them
something.
would talk to her. So there's just a lot of weird stuff.
I was just hearing something.
I didn't hear
Do you-
anything.
Several times.
Fascinating moment of silence for
I know.
our listeners.
This is great radio. There have been just several times when you're talking where I feel like out of this ear, I'm
I
like
see you look-
hearing
I see you
something
look.
in the
I don't know
hallway.
if I'm boring you. 'cause
No,
I see
no,
you
no.
look
I'm
away.
like trying to focus on what you're saying, but I keep kind of like in between words. I'm like, am I hearing something out there? I think I'm just being paranoid because it was
yeah.
raining before and you could kind of hear that. So
The rain hitting the roof. But that's 3 typical kind of stories
Yeah.
that you're gonna find when you look up this stuff. So here are the common factors.
yeah, let's get
There's
into
a
that.
lot of common factors. Victims often disappear wearing brightly colored clothing.
Which is odd to begin with.
It is, but I also don't know if it is, because if you're out camping or you have kids, you're going to want them to be spotted, so you're going to make them wear something brightly colored.
Well, what's odd to me about that though is that you could lose sight of someone
Yeah.
so quickly who's
Yep.
wearing something so bright.
Yeah. And the thing is, a lot of these disappearances happen in an instant.
Yeah.
You're talking to somebody, you look away for 30 seconds, you look back, and they're gone. Just completely gone. So victims often disappear wearing brightly colored clothing.
Okay.
Search dogs often
won't pick up a scent.
Don't want to pick up a scent, won't go after anything.
Okay.
Victims often disappear when they're alone or are the last person in line, and that happens a lot.
Yes.
There was a story about this group of friends that would go, there was like a little lake in a canyon, and in order to get to the canyon, you had to walk this trail that had 2 canyon walls on either side of you. So they went to this lake. They always did this when they went hunting. They went to the lake, swam around. It was a tiny little lake. They got up and left, walked the trail out. When they got to the end of the trail, their friend that was the last in line wasn't there. So they kind of waited, never showed up. They walked back to the lake, and he was just gone. And there were canyon walls on the sides of the trail, and he was just gone. And it happens a lot where the person that is last in line disappears.
I think that's, I had listened to the Vanish podcast, an episode. She did an interview with the dad of a little boy who went missing. I can't remember his last name, but his first name was Jared, the little boy. Yeah, that's
Jared.
It starts with a P, maybe?
No, it starts with an A.
Oh.
Jared Adadero.
Yes, that's it. And the dad had stayed back. They owned like a resort that was at the foot of a mountain. And the family friends had taken this little boy, who I think was maybe 3 or 4, something like that.
3 years old. Taken
him for a hike in the woods. And I think that they just kind of lost track of him. I'm like, how does that happen? I'm sorry, but if I had someone's, not blaming these people, but if I had someone's child in my care, they would be in front of me at all times. That I would not have them walking behind me. And it sounds like that's what had happened, that he had lagged behind them. And I thought, who lets a 3-year-old lag behind them?
That's the same case where he disappeared, and a little while later, there were 2 fishermen down on another trail that were fishing, and they said he came walking up to them on the trail and asked them if there were any bears around. And they said no.
Such an odd question to ask. They said no,
and they let him walk off. And everybody is like, why would you leave an unsupervised
3-year-old child
in the middle of nowhere? Just let him walk off.
Right.
And they were the last 2 to see him alive. His body was later found.
Well, not really, though.
No, his body. No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Part of a skull.
Part of his skull
and a tooth
were found up on this ridge that was 500 feet.
Impossible to get to, like
it
almost a cliff.
It was impossible to get to, plus he didn't know how to tie his shoes, so his shoes were never tied. And David Paulides said for him to get up there, he had to climb on his hands and knees over horrible terrain. And he said that there is no way that he should have been able to make it up there with his shoes.
And his shoes were found there.
Yep, his shoes were found there, and his
no
pants were
scuff
found
marks.
There. His pants were found there inside out.
Mm-hmm.
And later, the police, when they gave it to him, had him right side, like the right way you would have him, which is he thought was weird because having your pants inside out would almost be like they were torn off of you.
Right.
His pants were found. His sweatshirt was found. His shirt was never found. His shoes were there. And what everybody said...
But his clothes were found years later, though.
Yeah, 4 years later. And
yeah.
Everybody said what was weird were that his clothes looked not brand new, but they looked like they should not have spent...
The shoes looked almost brand new,
yeah. The shoes looked almost brand new. Not like they spent 4 years in the winter, in the summer with the sun beating down.
Right.
They should have been...
Well, and the dad said that the shoes also, if he had been dragged... There, like, because of course the forest people want to say it was a mountain lion. I think. Yeah. There was no blood. None of the clothes were shredded.
There were reports in the news that his pants were shredded,
but they weren't.
But I read his sister posted something and said no, the pants were not shredded. She said they were picked at, and birds were taking pieces of the clothing for their nests, but she said the pants were not shredded. But
yeah,
I've seen pictures of the shoes and all that, and they look.
Oh, really?
They look new. They look like.
Well, and they said there were no scuff marks. Like if he had been dragged, there would have been some kind of scuff marks.
That's what they said about. That's
and there was
why they
nothing.
said that they do an animal attack. There would be a ton of blood.
Oh yeah.
There would be hair.
Because they go right for your stomach, I guess.
Yeah, there would be signs of a fight.
And there was none of that.
There was just like a tooth laying there, which is weird.
One tooth, and okay, so the dad sent the tooth out to be tested for DNA. and it came back with 2 people's DNA on it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And they not only did it have 2 people's DNA on it, but the people never told him if his son's DNA was one of the profiles that was found on it. But they did confirm, I thought, that it was one of his teeth.
What else is weird is that when David Paulides, yes, when he went to the location, because he films YouTube segments on these people,
okay,
and he goes to the location where they vanished. He climbed to the top of that ridge, and he said it was almost impossible for a grown man to do that. He got up to the top, and while they were shooting, he found also laying up there was a old, beat up Rubik's Cube. And he said that was his son's favorite toy.
Really?
And he didn't have a Rubik's Cube with him.
He did or he didn't?
So he has a picture on this website of this. You can see that it's weathered and it's all beat up. So I can't get over the shoes. That there's no way that those shoes
and that's
sat
very
up
common.
There for 4 years. Yeah,
isn't that one of the common things? They find shoes.
Yes. Yep.
In really good condition, tied and set up very neatly.
So
either next to the body or
going back to the common factors. The victims are often alone or the last person in line.
Okay.
People are often found dead or alive at a much higher elevation than the location of their disappearance.
Yeah.
And they kind of make a big deal about this, especially with kids, because they said you're going to want to go the path of least resistance.
Yeah. What kid's going to climb uphill?
But on the other hand, if I was lost, I would want, and I saw a hill, I would go up there to look around to see if anything
What
is
3-year-old's going to think of that, though?
I know. And why would this kid climb this really rough terrain to get 500 feet higher than the trail?
I'm guessing he wouldn't have been able to in the first place.
A lot of these kids and people that disappear are found at an unusually high area.
Okay.
There was another report that I read where this young boy again disappeared. And this couple were out miles away from where this boy disappeared, like quite a ways away. And they were out walking a trail, and there was a big hill, or I want to say a cliff, kind of in front of them. And they're looking, and the wife points up there, and she said, "Look at that." And he looked up there, and you could see a young boy peering over the cliff at them. Mm-hmm. And they both said it looked to them both like something yanked him back.
Oh.
Like just pulled him back.
Oh.
And their first thought
Gives
was
me the heebie-jeebies.
The first thought was that the parents were up there.
Yeah, get away from the edge. Yeah.
And they were like, what parent would let his kid
hang over the edge of a cliff?
Come up to the edge of the cliff and look down like that. So they went back, back to their car or whatever, then heard the news report, and then they saw a picture of the boy, and they said that was the boy they saw on that cliff above them, just looking down at them and get yanked back.
That's strange. Yeah. Okay.
So a higher elevation. Berries also figure weirdly into a lot of these things where people are picking berries.
Okay.
They're found under berry bushes.
I have not heard this one.
There's like 2 or 3 very weird stories. One happened in the 1800s where this girl...
It goes back that far?
They have ones going back to the 1700s.
Wow.
And they follow these same traits. But there was one in the 1800s where this 3-year-old girl was with her dad on the trail, and he turned away for a second, and then she was gone. They looked for her. They couldn't find her. Him and a bunch of friends went out the next morning, were walking near this creek, and they heard what they thought was a girl yelling. So they started going to where the yelling was coming from, and they saw what they said was a dark figure jump out of a bush, jump into the creek, and they could hear it paddling. So they get up to the bush, and the girl is there. They're trying to ask her what happened. They said, why didn't you call to us yesterday? And she said, Mr. Wolf wouldn't let me.
Mr. Wolf?
Mr. Wolf wouldn't let me. And the girl had a hat on when she disappeared, and the dad said, where is your hat? And she said, Mr. Wolf ate it off my head. And she said, but that's okay because he was friendly, because he kept me warm all night and fed me berries from his hand.
From his hand?
From his hand.
But he ate her hat?
Yeah. And then there are other stories where kids disappear, and they say that they lived through the night because they were taken in by bears, and bears cuddled with them and fed them berries all night.
Oh, my God.
So there's quite a few stories. like that.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
What about, are there more common factors?
Yes.
Okay.
Children are often found missing items of clothing, completely naked, or their clothes are on backwards.
Yes.
Children are almost always missing their shoes. And older people too.
Yes. That's one I've read about a lot.
Yeah.
People try to explain that away as they're delirious.
Well, there's something called paradoxical unclothing or disrobing.
Like you're confused.
Where it's a hypothermia thing where you're so
out of it
and your nerves are so shot from hypothermia that you actually feel like you're burning up. So you take off your clothes.
Okay.
But a lot of people that just kind of glance at this stuff say, oh, that's hypothermia.
Why just your shoes though?
Taking off your clothes. But a lot of these people, their clothes are found pretty near where they got lost and not long after. Mm-hmm. There was one case where they found the person's clothes folded up in a field.
Right, like hypothermia wouldn't have set in yet.
They were folded up in a field laying there.
That's what I've read too, is they're folded.
Based on the distance and all that it had 45 minutes after the person disappeared.
Right, that's not enough time for hypothermia.
Sometimes when this happens, it's not
even cold. Right.
I mean, if it's super hot, I could see taking off your clothes.
Yeah.
But some of these are moderate temperatures, and
even then, who's going to take off their clothes in the middle of the woods?
I don't know.
I don't care how hot I was.
Shoes are missing a lot. In a lot of these cases, shoes are gone.
And that's really that's like the opposite of what you think you would do, because you're walking through a densely wooded area where your feet are going to get injured if you're not wearing shoes.
That I was telling you before about that. I think he was a skier, but he had like really good outdoor skills.
Yeah.
He had a GPS with him. He had a cell phone with him, and he was with some friends skiing, and his friends were getting tired, and he said, "I'll meet you up at the next stop." So they went to the next stop, and he wasn't there. So they went to the next stop, and he wasn't there. They searched for him, found his body at the foot of a cliff. Just a long ways away from where he would have been. Mm-hmm. And in order to get there, he would have had to go over like impossible terrain, which makes no sense whatsoever. And they never found his boots. His boots were gone. And that happens in almost all of these cases.
That was, a really common thing that I read, that found cases where people were found both alive and dead. These are all separate cases, not people who were found both alive and dead. That they were found in a location, either, they were alive and they were found there, or judging by the estimated time of death where their body was found, it would have been impossible for them to get that distance from where they went missing.
That's the next one here is children and missing adults are often way beyond the normal radius for the time period they were missing. 2-year-olds have often been found up to 20 miles away within mere hours.
That's crazy.
Of their disappearance. Over rugged terrain that would be almost impossible to cross.
Right.
That happens in a lot of these.
I mean, how do you explain that?
Don't know.
Unless somebody took them and there's some kind of access road and they drove them.
Yeah, it makes no sense. People often go missing in areas or are found in areas where there is water. Creek beds, rivers. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of these take place near water.
Although granted, a lot of national forests probably have water creeks running through them, so that might just be a coincidence.
In a lot of these cases, during the disappearance or immediately after the disappearance, the weather changes really rapidly and really strangely. Like it'll be a nice day, then all of a sudden it'll be a
pouring rain or something.
Thunderstorm.
Yeah,
that happens in a great deal of these cases.
Back to the water thing too. That could just be like a logical instinct for
where
people.
You're going to want to follow the stream or follow the river
because it'll lead you to civilization. That's like survival 101. They're not going to know that. But that is sort of like survival 101. Yeah. If you're lost, find a stream or something and follow it.
Is that some of these I can kind of understand, but when you look at the number of these,
the sheer number of them,
the circumstances, it doesn't make sense. People often go missing or are found in locations where there are granite boulders. That's like a big thing, and I don't know why the granite, that just pops up a lot in these things.
Okay.
And this is a big one. People are often found in areas that have been searched extensively
over and over again. Yes.
There was this one where these people were using this trail to go in and out, and they must have went on the trail dozens of times each day. Then finally they stopped searching, and a couple days after they stopped searching, some people that were just using the trail found the person laying there.
Yeah. Yes,
And
that's
some
very
of that
common.
I could kind of explain away as the person wandering around, circling, lost, and
Yeah.
they just happened to. But that happens in a lot of these cases where the body turns up.
Well, and that's just it. It's a body. It's somebody who is dead. So it would be a really strange coincidence that they would wander back to an area that's been searched and die there.
David, doing these cases, has said that sometimes it seems like they're almost put in a location intentionally to be found.
Yeah, that's what you would think. That's almost what that suggests.
And a high volume of young children that can't speak yet, or disabled people, disabled older people, disabled children, disappear. And if they're found alive, they're not able to really say
what happened to
them. A lot of these people this happens to, even people that are well-spoken, say that they don't remember. They don't know. There's just like a blank where they're gone.
It's maybe a good thing.
And then alternately to that, a large number of the adults that disappear are extraordinarily smart. Physicists, doctors, lawyers.
Oh, this all points to aliens.
And, David said it's almost like something is checking the opposite spectrums of the brain. Like something is testing the brain, where you're checking the people that have learning disabilities on one side, and then you're checking extraordinarily intelligent people.
I mean, it would, of course, aliens would explain so much of it, you know?
Yep. And sometimes people, there's a few situations where people are with other people and they say something weird before they disappear.
Oh, really?
Like there was one case where it was dark and this guy was walking with his group of friends on a trail and they really couldn't see each other well. Then all of a sudden he goes, "My God, where did you all go?" And he was gone.
Oh my God.
Yeah, just gone.
That's weird.
And that was what
that kind of reminds me of that woman who said she could see people, but they couldn't see her or react to her. It's like that moment when he crossed into maybe a alternate universe.
And that's kind of what David is gonna do in that book, where he's talking about like the weird phone calls, like thinking sideways.
That's interdimensional type stuff.
Like the one guy that said, "Oh shit," and then all of a sudden his phone went out and they can't find him. They have no idea where he went.
Oh my!
I don't know if you listened to that one.
I think I did, actually, yeah.
Yeah, that's like a big mystery case where...
He was on the phone with somebody,
he was
right?
talking with his parents. I think it was his
parents.
Didn't
his car break down or something? His car broke down,
and he was trying to tell his parents...
There's maybe someone else there that he hit somebody or someone hit him. Yep. There's a 911 call. You can listen. Isn't there a 911 call?
I didn't hear the 911 call, but I know he was talking with his dad, and all of a sudden he said, "Oh, shit," and the phone... It wasn't like he dropped it. It was like...
He reacted to someone.
And hung up.
Yeah. And they never heard.
But there's a couple, like looking through these, I read a couple other ones, like where there's weird phone calls.
Okay.
But we can get into that one where we do a show about weird phone calls. But there's a lot of cases where somebody says something weird or something like that before they disappear.
Okay.
So those are pretty much the main. But these happen in a lot of the cases.
Makes you want to go for a long hike.
The shoe one is like a big one.
That's just so bizarre.
There was a case where I think it was a 2-year-old boy disappeared. He was later found. He was dead.
Okay.
His shoes were on, but his socks were in his pocket. And his mom said he didn't know how to tie his shoes. So there was no way that he would have been able to untie his shoes, take his shoes off, take his socks off, and tie his shoes again.
That's strange.
So there's just... Researching this is just kind of nuts because there's so much...
Yeah. So do you have a list of explanations?
I have a couple possible theories. The one that you brought up that most people kind of say is a Bigfoot type creature. Mm-hmm. And David won't say what he thinks it is. He kind of wants to leave it open to everybody's interpretation, but...
Until we have an answer, maybe.
Yeah, him being a Bigfoot...
Enthusiast. Yeah.
A lot of people say a Bigfoot type creature.
Okay. Aliens.
But you know how I feel about the Bigfoot.
Sure.
I would think that's...
Yeah, but that sighting by the Key family, that's interesting.
But that gets to the next one.
Okay.
Mountain men.
Okay, there you go. Along the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah. I read, it was a forum somewhere where people were talking about weird...
I suppose if someone had really long hair, a really long beard, and you saw them from a distance and they were wearing like dirty clothes, it would look like some kind of hairy thing.
Yeah. But I was reading
the terrain
on the Appalachian Trail where it was him and his girlfriend camping, and they were way off on the trail, like in areas where people don't go. And they said they were out there for like 3 days, and all day they would look behind them and they would see people like kind of peering out of the woods, following
creepy.
them. And at night they would hear somebody going through their stuff outside, and they had guns, and as soon as they went out, they'd be gone. That they think that these were mountain people. That
it could be.
Yeah.
That's totally plausible. There are I mean, they have TV shows about these people now. So that's mountain men, whatever.
Theories, but what are they doing? I mean,
but that doesn't explain.
I mean, if they're raping the kids,
that could explain why the clothes are coming off.
Why do some of the kids show up again fine and nothing?
It doesn't explain them being carried a distance that would be impossible to travel in that amount of time, you know?
Yeah. But the sighting that the Key family had on that ridge, I could see being a mountain man.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the possible explanations. Another one that people bring up is serial killers. And I think that could account for some, but
it doesn't explain the unexplainable
like the
stuff.
Yeah. You know?
Right. Yeah.
And how could they do some of this stuff where, like you said, the body, where they're miles away from where they should have been?
Right. Okay, so I did read, I popped into Reddit really quickly today, and I did read someone's explanation that actually seemed pretty plausible, and it was birds of prey. So like a large enough eagle can pick up like a goat and carry it off.
Well, yeah, because some of the ways that the dead people are found, Paulides said that it almost appeared that they were dropped from a height.
Right.
When there's no cliff there, like they were just dropped out of the sky.
Like that would explain how they're found so far away.
Like the heavier people.
Obviously
and some of them have been found like that, where it seems like they were just dropped out of the sky.
But it could explain some of the kids.
Some of the younger kids, yes.
And it could explain why shoes like fall off.
Yeah.
Or clothes are kind of, you know, the one person said, let's say it's got a kid's, you know, in their talons holding onto their pants or their clothes or something, and then loses grip. You could see how a kid would fall right out of his pants, and they would get turned inside out on the way down. Yep. Shoes would get pulled off, you know. I mean, it's kind of far-fetched, but it's happened.
I think it could be possible, but not for all the cases.
No.
But it could account for some of them, and I do think that animal attacks could account for some of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I think it would leave evidence, though. There would be evidence. There'd be blood. There'd be clothes would be ripped.
Yeah.
There'd be fur traces of the animal, something.
You know, I don't know enough about David to know.
Is
some
he
of this
credible?
Could be confirmation bias, where you find
you're looking for what you want to prove.
Yeah, and you might let's hide this fact. We don't need to know that.
Right.
You know, so some of it could be that.
Okay, that reminds me of the fact. I just watched a documentary about Amelia Earhart. We talked about this.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because everything they point out, it's so convincing, but it's so incredibly biased. And then you find out after the fact that the picture that they're basing the whole thing off was debunked as being published in a book like 2 years before Amelia Earhart even went missing, that sort of thing. Yeah. I'm watching another one about this guy who is the great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes, and he's claiming that he thinks he was Jack the Ripper. Yeah. So everything that they're looking for is to prove that he is who he thinks he is.
With the Stephen Avery documentary, where it was just
so
skewed
biased
one way that so many people that knew nothing about the case watched that and were like, he's totally innocent.
Yeah. Oh, he's a good guy.
So it is very possible with
with his books that's, you know.
Yeah. Another theory is alien abductions.
I feel like that's the most plausible explanation.
You know, there's theories that after Roswell, the president met with the aliens and they exchanged technology, and that explains the computer boom.
Who was the president at that time?
Was it Eisenhower?
Okay.
I don't know. Washington. I suck at history.
Lincoln.
You know, Lincoln.
Obama. I don't know either.
Took him with them.
So they exchanged technology information.
That's one of the big theories is that we have caught aliens. You know, Roswell, that we captured aliens and we exchanged. They gave us technology, and that explains like the big boom that happened around that time with computers and technology, and that in exchange for that, we allowed them to take humans to test stuff on.
So the alien explanation would be a good way to explain.
That's the thing is that
why clothes are missing. They're doing tests.
If you want to secretly grab people, you're going to grab them out of the woods where there's not a lot of people around.
No witnesses.
Yeah.
That would explain how they traveled really far distances, why they don't remember stuff.
But that's one of the theories. But then, why does Joe Sixpack in his trailer see them, too?
Right.
So I don't know. But that's kind of one of the convincing theories.
Yeah.
Is that it's alien abductions, that if you're going to grab a human, do it where there's nobody else around.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why some of them are given back. That's why maybe some aren't. But,
maybe they meant to give all of them back and some just kind of get lost on the way.
The story where the kid said that, his fake alien or robot grandma said that he was put there in his mom by an alien.
I'm picturing the housekeeper on the Jetsons. Like,
I don't understand.
What was her name?
Coming out of
I don't
head.
either.
I don't get that. But
yeah,
he said
that's
that
strange.
there were other robots there that didn't talk or move. So I don't know. But alien abductions is one of the popular theories.
Yeah.
The two most popular ones seem to be Bigfoot and alien abductions. Another theory is a weird dimensional thing.
Well, that makes sense too.
Portal.
That makes sense too, especially the woman who said she couldn't interact with people.
Why is that just in the woods? Why?
I don't know. Maybe this stuff happens out in the middle of the city, but they assume that somebody was abducted.
On Above Top Secret, there's a website called Above Top Secret where people talk about UFOs and aliens and ghosts and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and
I've been there.
Yeah,
That's a good
it's
site.
like 75% kooks, 25% legit people.
Sure, yeah.
But there's a thread on there called Strange Forest Stories.
Okay.
Where people are talking about the weird things that happen in woods, and there's a lot of weird stuff that happens in woods.
Yeah.
Even geocaching, like there was one, I think it was near Cleveland or Sheboygan, where Aaron and I went in to get a geocache. It was just this little woods, and we went in there, and both of us were like, no, we do not want to. Yeah, it was weird because it was a sunny day. It was a nice day, and I felt it first, and I didn't say anything. Then Aaron goes, I don't like being in here. I feel weird in here. And I told him I do too. It felt like we were being watched.
Ooh.
It was just weird. It was like it's just nice little woods, and we just hated being in there.
So Cleveland, that's where there's like a college over there. Yeah.
LTC.
We should go there.
Investigation.
As we talk about how people get lost in the woods.
There's a lot of weird things that happen in woods, and reading that.
Yeah.
So maybe it's something to do with the woods themselves, that there's something going on there. But that's one of the theories, is a weird dimensional thing.
Well, as Georgia Hardstark and Karen Kilgariff like to say, don't go into the woods, you idiots. Bad things happen when you go into the woods by yourself.
And the last theory is that nothing is going on, that he is just blowing things out of proportion.
Making connections where there are none.
Connections where there aren't any connections. But
sure.
I don't know.
What would the families have to say about that?
I don't know. I've seen skeptics on there like tear apart go through every one of these and say no.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But
I guess it's one person's word against another. We're just taking his word for it.
But like I said, he really researches this stuff. He has documentation on this.
Here's the thing,
there is a lot of weird things.
But couldn't he just make that documentation up?
I don't think so, because I think you can actually go back, and I think he has like where he got this.
It's
stuff.
authenticated somehow.
It's authenticated.
Okay. Well, that's good. Because I feel like I could create some kind of document, make it look photocopied, and call it evidence.
Yeah. But that's the popular explanations.
Wow.
I honestly
don't know what it is.
I really think that there's something weird going on.
Yeah.
And I just talked. I know I brought up a lot of stories, but I've probably heard 5 times the amount that I talked about on here.
Yeah.
There's so many stories.
Yeah.
And that's why I said, if you guys want us to do an episode where we just talk about these stories, we could do that.
Yeah, I'd like to do it just because I want to talk about them and hear about them.
I'm fascinated with this. I have been ever since and now that I've researched it, I kind of want to buy his first book to see what I think about it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I don't know what's going on. I think something is going on. Mm-hmm. I don't know what.
Yeah,
some of the stuff like the rain or the weird weather, it can happen. It can
absolutely,
it can totally happen.
Yeah, isolated storms, they happen all the time.
The people turning up in places that have already been searched, they could be circling lost and then just die there. Another one of these that I didn't have in here is that a large percentage of these people are found face down.
Oh, interesting.
And he says that that's not
your instinct. Nobody's just going to lay face down in the woods.
That because I'm feeling like if you're malnourished and lost walking through the woods.
You're going to lay on your
slowly
back.
Dying. No, you're going to be walking and then you're going to drop to your
Oh,
knees
I
and then your
guess.
face is going to plant in the ground. That's
I'm
kinda,
imagining that you're already sitting down or lying down when that happens.
That's why I don't know, because he says that that's not the usual way that people are found, is face down. He said most people are found
face up.
Face up, and I don't know. I don't know enough about that to.
Yeah, I don't know either.
But he said
for
that
me,
that's
my instinct is I'd be lying face up.
I wouldn't be lying dead in the woods
Probably
if
not.
it was my choice at all.
No.
So I don't know. I don't know what to make of that.
What's fascinating, I mean, like I said, missing persons cases are just fascinating to me to begin with.
But some of these people that really know what they're doing out there and have the equipment and stuff, like that guy I talked about, the skier that they didn't find his boots and stuff, he had, like I said, a GPS. He had a cell phone. He had a backup battery for his cell phone, and David took his phone, his actual phone he was found with, to that location.
See if it got reception.
And he had 2 bars. So he should have easily
been
able to make.
To be able to at least text somebody.
So why didn't he?
Yeah.
Why did he travel this crazy terrain?
Right.
You know, and there was another story where there were mountain climbers. And you know how they have themselves fastened?
Yeah.
One after the other.
Carabiners and whatever, yeah.
Yeah, where they're climbing up the mountain. And the guy at the very end, all of a sudden they felt it go slack. And they went and looked and never found the guy. He was just gone. His backpack was there, his stuff was there, and he was just gone.
That is the most striking one to me right at this moment, because, you know, you can see how someone could wander off of a trail or get, you know, fall behind and step off of a trail, whatever, but somebody's climbing up a mountain behind you and then they're just gone.
The guy that was ahead of him.
Where's he going to go?
That's the thing. They don't, no idea.
He should be at the bottom of whatever you're climbing.
They found his backpack. They found some other stuff of his, but
never found him. I don't know what's worse. I guess I think it would be, I don't know. I'm trying to put myself in the position of the families. What's worse is having your kid or your loved one, their body found under strange circumstances, or never having anything found.
I think the frustrating thing is having them found under strange circumstances, but nobody doing anything about it.
Right. Or having any way to explain it, or looking into it even. I guess the hard part about never finding a body is that you just always hold hope that they're out there, and you never stop looking or waiting for them to come home.
But so many of these people don't turn up.
I know.
And, you know, there was one boy that disappeared, and they eventually found his bones buried at the foot of a tree.
Buried?
Yeah, and they said it made no sense whatsoever because an animal wouldn't do that.
Oh, well, no.
So, I don't know.
Well, that's murder.
Yeah.
Did you see recently in the news that a couple that went climbing in the mountains, or like in the 40s, and never were seen again, that their remains were now just found frozen?
Yep. Yeah.
And their kids are like, well, now we know what happened.
Yeah. Yep.
That's crazy.
Yeah, this stuff is happening. I mean, some of these reports that I was reading or looking at were months ago. So it's happening
today.
He has a map in the book of what he calls like the hot spots.
Yeah.
The clusters where this stuff happens. And he is really, really protective of it. Like if somebody puts it on a website, he will make them take it down.
Oh, that's
because he
interesting.
wants you to buy the book to get the map. But I found a copy of the map online, and it's weird because there's a ton on the West Coast, ton on the East Coast, and it kind of goes towards the middle. Like Wisconsin and Michigan are on there. But then in the middle of the United States, there's nothing. There's like absolutely nothing down the center of the states.
We should definitely find out what the Wisconsin cases were and talk about those.
There's a couple. There was one weird one where a guy in Michigan went towards Lake Michigan, and he was technically in what they call the Lake Michigan Triangle, or the Great Lakes Triangle, where
Death's Door.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the Bay and Green. That's near Door County. It's just like, yeah, I know right where that is.
Where he went to the lake and disappeared, and they found his footprints going out to the lake and just stopped. Nothing.
Well, don't you just think he drowned though?
Months later, knocked on his parents' door. Apparently, he woke up miles away from home in a field in clothes that weren't his.
That's not what I was expecting you to say.
He had a backpack full of maps that weren't his. And he refuses to talk about what happened, so you don't know if that's one of those hinky things or he was up to shenanigans.
Right.
But that was the one that happened relatively near us.
Drug deal gone bad.
I'll show you after the podcast a map. There were a couple in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
There were a couple like near this area.
Oh, we should talk about these on another episode.
Yeah,
I want to go into detail.
I'd like to find out, but I think I'd have to buy his books.
Oh, I could. Like I said, I should go to the library.
I don't think the library has them.
You don't think so?
No.
I'll have to look. I'm in the county cat system for Milwaukee County, so I'll see if they carry any of his books. I can order them and have them delivered to my library.
I think I might just buy the first one off his site because I kind of really want to read this after researching all this. But there's lots of YouTube videos, interviews with him. There's lots of podcast interviews with him. So if you're interested in this, it's easy to find that stuff, but that's not the whole picture. He says you need the books for the whole picture.
Which kind of makes you go,
like
are you just trying to make a buck?
So, but there's another lady that wrote a book called Something in the Woods is Taking People. So there's lots of people that are kind of getting into this now.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, the circumstances are just strange, and kind of unexplainable.
Yeah. Yeah,
There's no logical explanation for some of the circumstances.
No. And even he says he went into this with the mindset that it was going to be Bigfoot or something like that, but he says there's just so much weird stuff that he doesn't know what to say is going on.
Right. Well, I certainly can't come up with, a definitive conclusion. So
that's that. That is
guys,
Missing411 in a nutshell.
Strangers, tell us what your theories are. Or do you have a story? Do you know someone who went missing?
If you have any weird stories about woods or forests,
weird
I would love
things
to hear that
happening.
Because I'm kind of fascinated by that.
Me too.
So let us know your theories. Let us know your stories. As always, let us know if you have any topic suggestions that you would like us to cover.
Absolutely. We'll start covering the ones people suggested too.
Yeah. We gotta get to those.
We should probably do that.
We gotta get to those.
I'd like to have some guests too. I think we have some friends who've had some personal experiences that'll come on the show.
My buddy Jamie that did our theme music might stop when he's going to be home next month, so he might. We're going to see if he could swing it to be like our third.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Person discussing it.
He can be the third wheel.
The third wheel.
Nice.
So that's that.
Cool. Well, that was fun. I could talk about this all day, but we're
Hopefully
almost
an
hour and a half in.
Or a national park.
Yeah.
I have never been in a national park. I have only been in a handful of state parks.
It's bucket list stuff for me, though.
I have only been in a handful of state parks.
Oh, I love our state parks in Wisconsin. They're beautiful.
I've been to
Point Beach.
That's it.
I'm sure.
Point Beach is the only one I've been to.
I got married in a state park, so you've been there.
Oh, that's right. You did.
Yeah. Kohler Andre. That's a beautiful, beautiful park. Any park along Lake Michigan is gorgeous.
I just need to get out more.
Peninsula State Park? You've been to Peninsula State Park
with me.
With
I was with you. All right, that's 3. Out of the 3 state parks I've been in, I was at
2 of them were with me. Nice.
I didn't disappear.
No. Thank God. Oh, okay. Well, we're going on an hour and a half here. That's like, this is our longest episode.
Hopefully you're
still with us.
Hopefully you didn't fall asleep.
Right.
I don't know. I find this stuff interesting as hell.
Me
really
too.
do.
Yeah.
So hopefully you do too. If not, let us know.
I think missing persons cases in general we could cover in the future. I mean, they don't have to just be about the forest ones. There's plenty of missing persons cases that happened under mysterious circumstances. So it's a topic I could just go on and on about for days.
Please let us know.
Yeah.
The strange sessions.
Or if you're listening and a loved one went missing and you would like us to cover the story just to get it out there, because the more people who hear about these stories, the better chances you have of someone who saw or knows something, getting in touch with you. So let us know. We're happy to.
The preferred way to get in touch with us now seems to be writing on our YouTube comments section.
Darn, I gotta look at that again.
You need to get on that.
I was really surprised that. Thank you, Kate, for commenting. By the way, Kate is Jeff's wife.
Oh, thank you, Kate.
Yeah, if you've seen her comments. Yes.
Cool.
So I was excited to see that she was listening to the strange
she likes
sessions.
our stuff a lot. She comments a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kate.
She's awesome. I haven't met her yet, but I know she's awesome.
She is awesome.
All right. Well, any more shout outs while we're on shout outs right now?
Not that I can really think of. I want to give a shout out to my brother, Corey, because he loves
Corey?
this podcast.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear.
He's not into this stuff. I mean, he's a skeptic.
Sure.
But he likes the podcast.
Well,
I'd love to have him here one day.
That'd be great. I like getting that perspective as well.
Yep.
So.
Any shout outs for you?
No, I think that's it. Just Kate. Kate was my shout out.
Okay.
So thanks, Kate. And I don't know. Should we wrap it?
We'll wrap it up.
Call it a day?
Stay out of the woods.
Yes, please stay out of the woods. At least, by yourself. Don't go into the woods by yourself.
Yeah. And if you disappear and you come back, tell us.
Yeah, we want to know.
We want to know what happened.
Sounds good.
Until next time,
Stay strange.